Hi everyone, my name's Olympia. I'm the CEO of GoTerra. We're waste management technology that delivers a circular economy. I'm looking forward to today and talking to you about the coolest industry that tech has just not yet found. So who am I and where did I come from and how the heck did I end up being a waste management tech person? I started off in agriculture, conventional agriculture, sheep and cattle here in Australia. And I was really invested and interested in producing things and the production of animals. I moved through sort of a junior agricultural career, got my degree in agribusiness, and ended up moving to the US, where I did quite a number of different jobs, including horse training and working with the United States Marine Corps. And then I found my way back to Australia, and all I wanted to do was go back into farming. But I was unable to afford to buy my own farm. And as I started to look at the unit economics and the business case for agriculture in 2014, 2015, I realized a lot had changed since I'd left the industry. And the biggest change was that the cost of feed was 70% of all operating costs. And that was a really interesting and challenging problem because feed is a volatile commodity and the price fluctuates sometimes quarter by quarter, which means actually plotting and understanding how your business is going to operate one year to another is getting harder and harder because the production of feed is entirely predicated on climate. So I started looking at other ways we could create feed where we could actually improve the unit economics and stabilize feed price. And I found insects. Insects are a super interesting opportunity to create more protein in a protein constrained world because they take wastes and they convert it into highly nutritious protein. The way we feed them was no different to any other agricultural animal. So you transport feed to a large centralized industrial feeding place like a feedlot, and you give them that feed and then they turn it into protein and then you process that protein. But again, we know that those things are challenged in conventional agriculture with the rising cost of petrol, the challenges of logistics. And so it was about trying to understand how we could unlock distribution. So we find ourselves today looking at the climate crisis, making us move into a food crisis. And I'm on the idea that maybe insects are a thing, but how do we unlock them as a capability to solve this massive problem? So if we can get the food waste to feed to the insects, then we will have created more protein from something that's now going to waste, and we'll have stabilized prices. But food waste isn't in one place. So how do we access it and unlock it? And then when you invert that problem and look at how do you solve for food waste, you recognize that food waste is actually suffering the same problem, which is that collecting food waste and aggregating it into enough volume to be economically viable is also a challenge. So how do you solve both of these problems at the same time and create a pathway to circular economy? That's how we ended up realizing that while we farm insects, we're actually in the business of waste technology. And I embarked on what has been to date the most compelling career of my life in the waste management industry. So not a lot of people know much about waste. We want it to go into our bins and go far away. We tend to think of it as a gross thing. We don't want to have to worry about it. But more and more, we're seeing waste turn up in our ESGs because waste is one of our biggest contributors to climate change across a lot of different verticals. So logistics, carbon emissions creation, and then also a pathway to creating valorization so that we can improve drawdown. So thinking about all of that, let's get to know the industry a little bit better. Current food waste management systems are super expensive and under a lot of pressure. Nobody likes to have their tax rates increased, nowhere in the world. And that means in the developed world, about 30 years, very few nations have actually invested much into their utilities. And what it means is today, we've got a lot of countries and a lot of states, a lot of regions who have utilities infrastructure in waste that is aging out or filling up. And so that means then that we've got big cities that have old landfills, old anaerobic digesters, and they're trying to figure out where they're going to put new ones, and those things are really far out of town. So we look at transportation costs being really high if you're going to move these facilities far out of town. Landfill then is getting more expensive to encourage people to pull stuff out of landfill, not send everything to landfill. We're running out of space inherently. There are very few alternatives that aren't centralized, and ultimately the environmental impact of some of our older waste infrastructure is really, really high. So if we think about a ton of waste to landfill, that creates 1,700 CO2 equivalent kilos of emissions. A ton of waste to GoTerra, significantly less. So what does food waste look like? I think we all think that food waste looks sort of like the picture on the left, where it's just sort of a large pile of stuff that's come out of farm or out of a packaging or manufacturing facility. But that's only really 26% of all of the food that we waste comes from farm gate through to logistics and the beginning of manufacturing. Most of our food waste happens post-consumer. So post-kitchen prep, post-supermarket retail, post-plate in a restaurant or hotel, or post your dinner table in your household. And that means that largely food waste is pretty contaminated. On the right is the first tip load that GoTerra ever received, and we were so excited because it was our first commercial load. Until it tipped out on the ground, we realized just what we didn't know about how contaminated food is. So when we think about solving this problem, we can't just think about how we process this food waste. We have to think about the dynamic of how we actually interact with food and how we make waste of food, so that we can actually solve the real problems, which are the human behavior connected to food, as well as the way food is wasted. So we thought about this across those pieces of sort of elements of its challenges. So super distributed waste stream that can be highly contaminated because the human interaction is limited to its care for how we manage it. And also this capability to valorize this into something that's super meaningful. So how do we valorize lots of waste when it's all over the place? So we decided that we were going to create technology that made a modular, essentially feedlot for insects, but that feedlot could be transportable and movable so that we could distribute the capability where it was needed. So what it looks like is you have a modular system that you can make one, you can add 50 to basically manage the waste in the volume that's required in the region that you're serving. Each of those units is filled with larvae, and for 10 days, those larvae are fed by the unit. So autonomously, the unit feeds itself to make sure that the insects have enough to eat. And every day, those insects are consuming and turning that food waste into protein. At the end of 10 to 12 days, the insects are recovered from the system. And what you have are the insects themselves and the insects' manure. And those two things now have value as agricultural commodities back into agriculture. So the fertilizer, the manure of the insect is used on cropping, in fruit trees and other kinds of production. And then the insects themselves can be fed in Australia to pork, poultry, aquaculture and pets. And in the US, they can be fed to aquaculture, some states poultry, and of course pets. And so now you've created this full circular capability, but you've also created an actual distribution unlock, which is really unusual with waste. So what it looks like then is on the right, we've got the status quo. So currently we've got centralized things, lots of trucks driving out, doing a logistics route to collect the waste and bringing it back to this centralized location. Our capability then allows an on-site processing of the waste at large facilities like manufacturing or big campuses and precincts, or creating hubs, distribution hubs. So where you can be located inside the city limits, but you're not actually massive. You're sort of just creating these small lap runs that optimize for logistics and create better outcomes. Across the food waste supply chain, this kind of solution can be used, and that's also really important because a lot of the alternatives are kind of narrow in what they can be, what they can accept and how they can process the waste. So you can think about lots of different ways that you can use distributed technology, but these are some of the kind of client types that these kinds of technology can address. The best part about it is it creates these different types of partnerships. So one of the things we've done with one of our main customers, which is a supermarket retailer, is figured out how we can integrate on multiple levels across the supermarket retailer's problem set. So yes, they have lots of waste coming out of their supermarkets, but they also have transport logistics challenges. So where the trucks are leaving a distribution center full, going out to a store, and then coming home to that distribution center empty. Now, those trucks are coming back with the food that can't be used at the supermarket in pallets, and it's dropped off at our location, which can either be co-located at the distribution center or close by. That means now we've optimized not only for waste management and unlocked all those stores, but we've also created optimization for backhaul logistics, which is a huge issue for supermarket retailers and improves their bottom line. That means you've got one customer that's both managing their waste out this way, solving their logistics out this way, and now their suppliers, their agricultural suppliers, can use the offtake, and we can create a beautiful and dynamic circular economy within the portfolio of one customer. What it looks like against other types of food waste management is fairly optimistic, and definitely you've got very opportunistic capability when you distribute in this way. So we produce less than 50 kilos of CO2 emissions per box for every ton of waste managed. And if you compare that across the alternate solutions, we are absolutely optimizing for the reduction of GHG emissions. Then moving down, looking at cost, again, super affordable across the capability set that we currently have in waste, and same again for land use and contamination tolerance. So if you think about how we are going to optimize, the barrier to entry has been reduced across each of the problem sets for the customer, and then the capability continues to create this really beautiful opportunity for people to have success. This is what it looks like in real life. So we had a greenfield project, which from contract sign to deployed and commissioned was 5 months. On the left, you can see this was the site at the Albury City Council landfill. We then built and commissioned the site that to make it look the way it does on the right. This site can grow to meet the community's needs, and now you've got infrastructure that doesn't cost on the ratepayer, but is just pay to play. So the ratepayer just pays a cost per tonne to use this infrastructure, and the landfill hosts the infrastructure so that it can actually create this capability without passing that cost on to the ratepayer. Similarly, this is a unit downstairs in the loading dock of the Barangaroo Tower 2. So there are 3 towers. It's owned by Lend Lease. It's their most sustainable precinct in Australia. This is a very prestigious waterfront location. The unit sits as a commercial depackager, would sit, and it's utilised by the cleaning staff who bring the waste from residential, office and retail. And then it's brought down, weighed, so we know by tenant how much waste each tenant is making and contributing to the unit. And then we are processing it there on site, significantly reducing GHG emissions and making it super easy for our customers. As an organisation, when we first started, we hadn't raised any funds. We were family and friends, or me working 2 jobs. And so finding the people who could contribute to developing our technology in the early days, we had to be a little bit more creative than I think what ends up being usual. And I was fortunate enough back then to have some really incredible immigrants and refugees come and join the team. They were looking for a way to have an Australian work experience, and I was looking for people who could, work on odd hours, sometimes on weekends, sometimes after work, and could, contribute meaningfully to help us progress in rapid ways. And what that taught me early on was that often we talk about diversity, and we generally categorize diversity as ethnicity or gender. So we talk about women, we talk about LGBTQIX. We don't often think about diversity of social, economic, or neurological. And so I felt that there was an opportunity here, potentially a little bit differently, to really think about what kind of team we needed to push boundaries rapidly. How would they think? What do we need? And ultimately we needed contrarians, and we needed people who had real different opinions about how to achieve a very difficult thing. So we find ourselves today a team of 56. We're 37% working with disabilities. We have people with disabilities working from the senior executive down to general staff. We are 65% women in leadership or management. We are 46% women. This is not the whole team, in case anyone's wondering. We have a high amount of refugee or first generation immigrant, so over 47%. And English as a second language, also around 47%. And so when we think about the team, that when they work together and how they think, we have to communicate differently as a team. You can't communicate as a normal cis person with neurotypical capabilities. You have to communicate as if every member of the team has not known English as a first language, and who needs different communication styles to truly understand your intention or your instruction. And so we've had to force the entire team and the company as a whole to communicate differently. So we communicate a lot in writing, which means then our detail and our instruction can be a little bit more understood. And we also have to think about how we deliver our content and the kinds of ways we would interact with each other. That sounds like a lot of work for a startup, particularly a tech startup, but also what it the reward of that is we can deliver first in the world infrastructure in less than 6 months. We're the fastest piece of technology for waste management that can go from signing to on-site in the world. There isn't any technology that can do it faster than we can at this time. We have a group of human beings that can do that, all of that very cheaply, because such a large portion of our team come from economically challenged backgrounds. And so they're used to not spending a lot of money or having a lot of resources at their fingertips. I have such a fabulous memory of our first chemical engineer who came to me with an idea for extracting the oil in a chemical process from the insects. Now, that's something that people across the world have spent millions of dollars trying to perfect, lots of machinery, lots of things. And so I was like, oh, Noir, I'm unsure, like, we don't have a lot of money for that. And he said, I need $25. I just need to go to the supermarket. And sure enough, with $25, Noir was able to create a 4-step chemical extraction process for oil that has such a high quality. It was almost game-changing for us. And so, like, these are not vignettes, but actual meaningful impact that can be achieved by organizations who truly think about diversity ingrained into the fabric of who they are as an organization, not as a check mark to acknowledging the need to be diverse. If you actually think about diversity as a tool to improve or scale capability within your business, then you can actually leverage those diverse individuals in your organization to achieve great success and rapid iteration of your technology. So I really appreciate being able to spend the time with you all today. I hate that I was not able to come on site, but certainly look forward to hearing from and interacting with anybody who'd like to learn more. And certainly anyone who wants to talk about waste or diversity of teams, I would really appreciate hearing from you and would love to continue the chat. So I wish everyone a wonderful day and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Bye.